This is Robert Margolacci of the Mindshare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. And welcome to This Week in Canadian EdTech, very special spring break edition as I'm here remotely down by the Scotiabank Plaza where the Toronto Maple Leafs are playing the Avs tonight. And I'm manifesting going to the game. And I'm honored to have joined me Dr. Steve Joordens, professor of psychology, from the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. He is the director of the Advanced Learning Technologies Lab, 3M National Teaching Fellow, as I mentioned, at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus, and the co-founder of Peer Scholar. He's in the EdTech space. Today we're talking the great snapback. Did it happen or not? We're talking about student well-being, which has been at a crisis. We're talking about ChatGPT. And we're talking about Peer Scholar, his EdTech coming of age. Thank you again for joining me, Dr. Joordens.
Always great to be with you, Robert.
Well, what a year it's been. We just celebrated last week the third anniversary of the onset of COVID. Yeah. It's been fascinating times, and I've got someone sitting behind me, but that's okay. Hopefully we're not distracting them. But you're back in the saddle. Today I had a strategy meeting with our partners, AWS, and we're in a boardroom overlooking the city of Toronto, overlooking the lake, overlooking Sky Dome, face to face. We had sushi lunch afterwards. And there's nothing that replaces face-to-face inspirational learning environments. And I know they're building a really cool building that we can touch on because we're involved with the architects and a video or digital book that they created on learning environments. How are you doing settling back in, most importantly, at University of Toronto Scarborough campus?
It is a really interesting time, right? When we were talking great snapback, the implication was always, we would go back to sort of the routines of the past. And I said, we'll just ease right into those. But of course, in some ways we have not. So I was certainly wrong. And one of those gets to that point you talk about, face-to-face interactions, that so many of us are now on a more hybrid kind of mindset. And I think trying to negotiate that, and it is very tricky. And I'll say it's tricky for myself as well. I see my colleagues a whole lot less than I did. We have fewer, real face-to-face interactions. And I think one of the stats that I always kind of keep in mind from people who study human interaction is that in the average face-to-face interaction, they claim less than 10% of the information shared is in the words that go back and forth. 90% is in the nonverbals, which we get some of here. You're nodding at the right time, you're smiling. Yes. So it's not like there's no nonverbals, but it's never richer than face-to-face in person. And, that's the one way I think, and I worry at some point, that as we all do less of that we sometimes don't understand the value it has to our mental health. In fact, some people now are talking about physical health, mental health, and social health. And I think literally our social health is being challenged right now. And I think we all have to become a little more intentional about seeking out those opportunities to interact with others and have those rich conversations, because they are really important. That human connection is really, really important to us psychologically.
Fascinating. Now, my faculty hockey colleagues at York University and Kin talk about some of the challenges in getting the students to want to come back to class because they've been kind of spoiled. And, people tend to take the path of least resistance and not realize the value in those human interactions that you talked about that are so vital to your well-being. We are social animals.
Yeah, we really identify with our frontal lobes, the rational, strategic thinking part. We kind of think that's who we are. They are actually a new component to a very old brain. And that very old brain is mostly based on emotion, instinct, habit. And that's the part that really gets an enjoyment, but more than enjoyment. Like if you and I sit and we have a really good chat, and especially if we laugh together, etc., I gain a trust with you. Literally, there's a hormone released that
Right.
builds that trust, and that makes me feel more secure in the world. I go out into the world and I've got one more connection that is somebody I feel like is on my side and that I can trust.
Interesting.
They're
Fascinating.
so important to our ability to be resilient. And I mean, we're living in very stressful times. And so that's, I
Well,
actually work with a not for profit called the Genwell Initiative. And this is
I've
their
heard of
whole
them.
goal. Yeah, to
Yes.
try to get this message out that we have to keep connection. Uh,
There's a famous quote that a former deputy minister shared at one of the C21 events, of which
yep.
you're a valued member of the board, that innovation happens at the speed of trust. And
Yep.
that is so poignant. And it was
Yep.
Kathy Montreal, who was a former deputy minister in Ontario that was down in Nova Scotia. And
Yep.
that, I looked it up, I attributed it to her, but actually Stephen Covey is the one
Mm,
who apparently coined it. And
yep.
it's so relevant. I was in Palm Springs at an ERDI, Education Research and Development Institute conference, of which I'm an expert advisor, and the
Yep.
superintendents. Now, there in the US, they're the CEO. They talked
Yes.
about the importance of having relationships with
Yep.
the right people. That relationships are important. And Harvard University released a report that talked about what people value later in life. It's not money.
Yep.
It's it's relationships,
Yeah.
positive relationships.
Yeah,
To
and I
qualify
mean, the
them,
danger is
trust.
what I see a little bit that worries me too is there's a bit of a compounding effect in the sense that even pre-pandemic, a lot of our students, because they grew up with social media as their primary social interaction, they didn't have as many face-to-face experiences as you and I did when we grew up. You know,
Right,
that was the
right,
default. That's all we could do. So we got a lot more exercise. So already social anxiety was very high amongst university students. And now with the pandemic, you know, like you say, they're sometimes not even going to classes now. They're perfectly happy to just stay in their bedroom and watch. Um, those opportunities, those relationships are what give you the opportunities. It's somebody has heard of something, or hey, here's this job over there, or whatever. And as you have this sort of depleted social interactions, yes, mental health wise, that's not good, but also just navigating through life. You and I know. I mean, I've often called you the great connector. A key role that you play in the education world is
thank you.
connecting us
I'll take
various
that as a
cats.
compliment.
It absolutely is, because you know that allows us to find other people with similar passions and interests, and work
Right.
together as teams, and that's where we do fantastic stuff. So those skills are absolutely critical, and that trust. You know, if you're going to throw out an idea that you think is a little, maybe a little out there, if you're in a room full of people you trust, you're okay doing that. If
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not, you're going to just keep it to yourself, and that might have been a great idea that just never saw the light of day.
Thank you for that. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. The great snapback. You
Yeah.
are infamous for coining this phrase, or famous.
Yeah.
Uh, a year or so ago, I've heard it internationally. So you're
Yep.
now international, but you did have that international online course that garnered what, 300,000 online
Closer to
views?
500 now, but yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yep.
But So where are we at with the great snapback? I've heard unions, teacher unions, I'm not going to mention where,
Yep.
discourage their teachers this past year when school was starting in September of using technology. Get the kids back. And so that speaks to the great snapback. But
Yeah.
what's real?
I mean, it really depends on the areas of life. Like you see some cases, at least for most of us, if you go to restaurants or if you go to, you know, you were talking about going to the hockey game. I guarantee you, you go to the hockey game tonight, you'll see very few masks. You know, see very
Right.
little of that evidence of the pandemic. People are happy to sit shoulder to shoulder in tight confined spaces, etc. So in some places of our life, we're back. But in other places, kind of as you allude to, there is a shadow of the pandemic, I think. And you know, in some cases in education, sometimes it became poor e-learning. We had to do emergency e-learning,
Mm.
and some of the exemplars that parents saw, the parents were now part of the e-learning that they didn't really want to be, but they suddenly became part of it. And I think there was a bit of a push of, okay, parents don't like this right now. It's got a negative connotation. Let's go back to a more traditional kind of approach. But that's not going to be sustained. I know we're thinking of talking about Chat GPT. There are
Right.
challenges. There are clouds on the horizon. As tired as many of us are, and as half burnt out as many of us are, I think we're going to have to rise to the challenge and find a way to get our mental health together and be creative and innovative again, because it's what
Absolutely.
it demands.
There was a lot of criticism around that tech post pandemic, and
Yep.
it wasn't elegant during crisis learning, but it was sustained learning. Now
Yes.
it's coming down to, now there's a lot of talk around what's real,
Yep.
what solutions are making an impact. And speaking of impact, you are an ed tech co-founder and
Yep.
peer scholar. I'm going to pop it up to give you a little bit of a commercial here, and talk to me
Cool.
about the inspiration behind it, and you coming of age of sorts.
Yeah. Wow. Look at this. Nice little screen shares. Fantastic.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
worries.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anybody wants to go to videos.purescholar.com, they can see this video that Robert's showing. This is also just on our regular website. But the cool thing is, this was an issue again before the pandemic, which was the question of, okay, we're doing a really good job of transferring knowledge to students, but in the world of the future, we know, and I'm talking to the converted here with C21, but we know they need to be able to think critically, to think creatively. They need to be able to work with other human beings effectively. So strong communication skills, socio-emotionally appropriate communication. So that's what Peer Scholar was created to develop. And I like to say that because one of the things I like to throw out is, there's an important distinction when it comes to skills. If somebody came to me and said, I'd like to know guitar, my question to them is, well, do you want to know about guitars? Do you want information about guitars? Because I can put you in a good lecture with a great professor, and in a short period of time, you can get a lot of information. Or do you want to learn to play? If you want to learn to play, it's a different story. You're going to have to play, and you're going to probably play badly at first. But if we give you the right environment with a lot of structure, a lot of support, a lot of feedback, then you can actually get better and better every time you play. And that skill can become second nature. And so Peer Scholar is about creating that environment, and involves, very quickly, students submit work, but then they act as the teacher for other students, giving feedback to other students and engaging critical thought, creative thought, such as they do. And then in a final step, they get feedback on their work, and we again guide them through a process of learning how to use that feedback formatively to make their work better. So that last part is kind of like the growth mindset. But where I differ
Brilliant.
from some people on the growth mindset is, I don't think it's natural. For most of us, when we get critical feedback, we want to fight or flee it. And so we have to learn how to actually accept the negative emotions that often come with that, to
Right.
negotiate those emotions and to use them. And that's really at the heart of what Peer Scholar is about, developing that sort of mindset while exercising all of these 21st century skills.
Well, the other, and kudos to you for hitting on those key metrics. And the other part of it is giving students agency, right? It's
100%.
You're talking about the democratization of learning,
Yep.
right? You're empowering students to take ownership. And so,
Yep.
on that note, speaking of democratization, let's touch on Chat GBT,
Yep.
because that is really, Phil Cutler and Paper Learning won our startup challenge. They've gotten a lot of publicity of late. They
Yep.
just acquired another company. They became a unicorn in 7 years. So no pressure, but it's not all
We're
about,
working on it.
money, but
Yep.
it helps. No, but it's about impact. And the more
Right.
people you impact and touch and impact in a positive way, as ChatGPT has, it is, I would say, looking back, the last time there was this much excitement was the onset of Google.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, there's excitement, and there's also, of course, deep fear and trepidation. It's another
Sure.
one of those binary kind of situations where you
Right.
find half the people scared to death of it, and the other half saying, "Hey, this is the best thing ever."
Yeah.
And it is both. I think. I mean, the
Sure.
first
A little
part
bit
of
of
it.
both, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, the first part of it, it is going to be disruptive. There's absolutely no doubt that for standard educational practices, it's going to be a little disruptive. Now, for those of us, and you're in this camp, who value these skills and who have been saying for years, we need to teach these skills because AI is coming for these jobs that don't require the skills. AI is here. To some extent, there's more wind in our sails to say, okay, we really have to get busy on these 21st century skills. We have to find concrete ways of enhancing our classroom, giving our students that exercise, and we have to do it now. And we're going to have to figure out, hopefully, how we can use ChatGPT to help us do that. And so there's going to be a little bit of blowing up of standard practices, I think, and it's a hard time for us right after the pandemic to have to be pushed
Right.
into another one of these disruptive kind of situations. But I ultimately think this will be a really good thing, and that it will help us better prepare our students for the future they're actually going to inherit.
Yeah. Well said. And I think, it comes down to, uh, you know, understanding, another former professor, colleague of yours
Oh,
way back, Dr. Marsha McLuhan,
ah, yes.
uh, coined the phrase, the medium is the message,
Yep.
right? Or the technology, we create the technology and the technology shapes us, to paraphrase. So
100%.
we need to keep control. And to your point about 21st century skills, the 7 C's of C21 Canada, critical thinking,
Yep.
understanding what this can do for you. You are in control.
Yep.
We had a press release that needed to be done for the ISTEC or FETC conference, and I entered some data. This is what we're doing. This is what I'd like you to generate. Boom! It created a full-blown press release with the headline boilerplate about us, and I tweaked it. We
Yep.
tweaked it. It gave quote like that's so. Anytime you can give time back to teachers
Yeah.
and students, there's value to that, isn't there?
There is, of course, the worry is, sometimes we use these tasks like writing. You can almost imagine a student or a teacher using write a press release as a learning task in a
Right.
course, and trying to get the students to engage in that. And now, if they can just get ChatGPT to do it, that becomes the problem. But the fun irony, I think, or the meta level of this is for those of us who've been talking about the importance of critical thought, creative thought, communication. We now have to walk the walk. We've been talking the talk. Well, okay,
Right.
so now we're in a situation where we're going to have to really think, how do we integrate it well? So assignment, you could have an assignment that worked kind of like yours, work
Right.
with Chat GPT to do something, but know the limitations, etc. Or you ask students to do some task that Chat GPT can't do because it's future oriented or something like that. Chat
Right.
GPT is past, but we are going to have to retool, and we are going to feel the importance of critical thought and creative thought ourselves, because we're going to have to redesign the way we do things. And that's both exciting and scary. Again, we're all a little burnt out, so the scary part's hard, and so that's where my messaging is kind of a funny mix now when I talk to people. Part of
Right.
it's the excitement of educational innovation, part of it's mental health, and
Yeah.
what we need to do to have the strength and the ability to meet the challenges that we have.
Well, and point well taken. Because as I entered, the building here downtown, I came across a homeless person that was bare feet, in
Sheesh.
bare feet, and obviously challenged, right? So we need to understand that mindsets aren't all in the right place, right?
Mhm.
People are at different places in their lives and struggling, and
Yep.
we need to address that,
Yeah.
in society. So your point's very well taken, but the importance of socialization
Yep.
and be getting outdoors,
Yep.
especially for younger students, in K-12 or
Yep.
higher ed, post secondary. Get outdoors, give yourself a break. And I'm taking a bit of a break from playing hockey because I took a slap shot on my tibia, and
Ouch.
where there's no padding, so that didn't
Yep.
feel very good. but I still managed to walk, right?
Yeah.
The dog yesterday.
Good.
But, I always enjoy our conversations, Dr. Joordens, and, your perspective on things gives me hope. What gives you hope for the future?
What gives me hope for the future? Wow. So there's this notion called the common enemy. This is going to be a weird answer in
Yeah, okay.
psychology, but the notion of the common enemy, that when you have a challenge, and to some sense, we can think of Chat GPT as, yes, both opportunity, but also a bit of a common enemy. It's challenging what we're doing, and when humans are faced with a common enemy, they very often will pull together and work and get past the things that might have otherwise divided us. And so I think that's my hope. We have so many challenges that face us for the educational
Hmm.
system, but even if we go bigger to the world, you just have to turn on the news for a while, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is a really existentially challenging time.
Yeah,
But that's what humans rise to, and that's often where some of the most interesting innovation happens. And so I feel like we're in a bit of a boiler cooker right now,
right,
and it's up to us to find our way out to a better sort of future.
right.
And so I have hope we will do that well.
Thank you for that. And one of your outlets is playing music. You're part of a band. Have
100%.
you resumed your band
Yeah,
gigs?
I mean, yeah,
A lot of
yes
people
and
didn't
no.
catch what.
Yeah, no, no, we got it. We have to get the gig. We've resumed the practices. We've kind
Okay.
of pivoted in true ed tech, or in true entrepreneurial style, from being a cover band that used to go and play 30 covers to an original band. And so we're working up a set of
Oh,
originals
wow.
right
Good
now.
for you.
Yeah, and
Well,
then we're going to go out and do that.
do leverage ChatGPT to generate some music because I think that could really work well for you. And final question: who are you cheering for F1 this weekend?
It's tricky because as I think I've been a Max Verstappen fan for a while with my Dutch background, and he
Oh,
was the Wunder kid coming
hate
up,
that
and
guy. Hate
yeah,
that guy.
but he's now in the car that everybody wants to beat, which sort of
Yeah.
changes the dynamics. And we have this Lance Stroll, Canadian guy,
There you
I,
go.
and
That's a little
so
better.
that car is looking good, and so yeah, Lance is got my vote for now.
Nice.
We'll see where
Well,
he
I
goes.
know you have a hard stop at 3:30. I want to give you a bit of a breather for your next meeting. Thank you so much for your time. It's been too long. Always great to connect. We need to make this a series.
Sure, that'd be great. I'll do that.
That was Dr. Steve Joordens, professor at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus, psychologist, coined the phrase "the great snapback." Has his own EdTech peer scholar that you need to check out. It's awesome for students and teachers to help them with formative assessment in the 21st century. My name is Robert Merlanchi of the Mindshare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindshare Learning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.